In hour number one, I had a chance to have a lengthy chat with the chairman of the House Committee on Intelligence. The actual full name is the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and that, of course, would be Representative Devin Nunes. I started the discussion by asking him about Kayla Mueller, and I asked him, how does the United States verify the death of Kayla Mueller?
Well, I believe that the parents were going to hold a press conference, but it's unlikely that we will know unless they have a video of it, which is quite possible. But at some point, the truth will come out. But clearly, she was not killed by airstrikes. That's what our intelligence services are saying now.
Mr. Nunes, White House spokesman Josh Ernst, he confirmed there's at least one other American being held in Syria, and he said, and I'm quoting, there are other American hostages being held in the region, close quote. Knowing that, and as Americans and the rest of the world watch ISIS continue these horrific acts, are you satisfied? Is your intelligence committee satisfied that there is a definitive plan or strategy in place from the Obama administration?
Well, I just arrived home yesterday, and I can tell you I was in the Middle East. I was in Jordan and Turkey. I can tell you point blank, there is no plan in place to deal with this threat. And I always start people off that everybody on the tip of everyone's tongue now is ISIS or ISIL or ISIS. It goes back and forth. But people need to understand that this is Al-Qaeda. It's been termed as Al-Qaeda 6.0. So the leader, the former number 2 under Al-Qaeda Iraq, under Zarqawi, which is a name that people may remember, was the guy who is now the leader of ISIS in Syria or Iraq. We're not sure exactly where he's at. But also, so that's point number 1. Point number 2, ISIS is not only in Syria and Iraq. The president likes to say it is, but in fact, there have been ISIS attacks in Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, and furthermore, many of the fighters are coming from North Africa. So if you want to put together a strategy and a plan and tactics to accomplish a strategy, this is much more than what the president is talking about. And I mean, he's so far off base, not to repeat what everybody's heard on the news, but this guy won't even admit what the problem is. So how do you develop a solution to a problem when you can't even define the enemy?
Let's further that point, sir. And my guest, if you're just joining us, Congressman Devin Nunes, he is the chairman of the House Committee on Intelligence. It is obviously, and you laid that out very well, a complex and complicated narrative in the Middle East, and not just the Middle East. But as far as the Middle East goes, it spans rival religious sects, economics, the desire for, what would we call it, unfiltered power. How does the United States and our allies, how do we proceed in a manner that can, or hopefully, eliminate ISIS without upsetting what is already an unstable region relative to our continued presence there?
Well, as you know, it's a very complicated question that we could go on for a long time about, but let me just give you a few thoughts. First is that this is a president who campaigned on, first, that Iraq was the wrong war, Afghanistan was the right war. That was his first campaign. Second campaign, he campaigned on Al-Qaeda, bin Laden is dead, and Al-Qaeda is on the run. So right there in those two campaign platforms is a clear lack of understanding of the problems and the three-dimensional chess that exists in the Middle East. And then I don't have to go another direction that people need to be aware of is this is also a president who is going against not only the Republican Party in Washington, but also many of the Democrats, and negotiating away any type of solution to the Iranian nuclear threat problem at a time when the Iranians are funding and taking over several capitals across the Middle East. So what's happened is I don't believe I'm getting kind of to the solution here. The solution is there's not going to be a solution until the next president of the United States. Even then, it's difficult. But I can tell you this, that Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and is not going to be put back together again largely because of what this Obama administration has done over the last 7 years.
Well, let's continue to dovetail off of what you're saying. You just made a trip to the Middle East. You've made other ones. Give us a sense, Mr. Nunes, what you and your congressional colleagues have heard or gotten from those who live in the region relative to their view of the United States and whether they believe that our commitment is sufficient to go after and eliminate ISIS. What did you sense when you were there?
Well, no one believes, except for maybe the folks in the White House, that there's any plan whatsoever or the kinetic capabilities in place to take out and eliminate ISIS. No one believes that.
Wow.
None of our allies or our non-allies. So as you move forward, looking forward on what's happening, clearly the Jordanians desperately need our help. We are providing support for them. We have for a long time. So are some of the other Arab countries providing support for Jordan. Because if Jordan falls, if the king of Jordan falls, then you can have utter chaos break out across what are very, very fragile nation states, like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE, like Egypt. So as we move forward, it's going to be very important for the Congress to make sure that we support our allies in the defense bills that we pass this year, because that's about the only thing that we can control. But we're going to have to make sure that we support Jordan. We're going to have to support Israel. We have to support Egypt. We have to support the Kurds. And then we have to hope that the other oil-rich countries will also put their precious gold and whatever soldiers or kinetic capability they can bring to the battlefield. We hope that they'll continue to do that.
Let me throw one more country into the mix and get your thoughts on this, Mr. Nunes, and that is Saudi Arabia. In your view, should Saudi Arabia be a bigger player publicly as well as otherwise in dealing with ISIS, or are they simply playing it close to the vest because they don't want to get or give the perception of being too directly involved with us?
Well, it's all relative. If you take Saudi Arabia's posture from 10 years ago, it's dramatically changed. So we're happy with the direction that Saudi Arabia is going. Don't forget that the king of Saudi Arabia just died, which always brings up the concern that the people who are not part of the kingdom could rise up and go after the Saudi Arabian government. So that's a tepid process. It looks like they've had a smooth transition. And one thing that we've learned over the last 15 years or so is that we want to support nations that are supportive of the United States and our goals, even if they're not democracies, but are at least trending in a direction that will grant freedom to the people that are under their control. And it's not easy in that region, as we've found out.
So then let's roll back, if we may, to Jordan. Jordan has their hostage or their airmen, just horrifically killed by Islamic State. They respond swiftly. They respond emphatically, or at least it seems that way from a distance in all that we've read and all that we have seen. Going back to the murder, let's not call it an execution, the murder of James Foley. Why didn't the and this may be an obvious answer, but why didn't the United States and the Obama administration act with similar swiftness and power outside of just words?
Well, I think it's even worse than that. I think if it wouldn't have been for the two reporters' heads being cut off, the Obama administration would have never done anything. Because remember, this is a guy who thinks just because he says it, it happens. So this president doesn't understand war, never understood war, doesn't understand the enemy. And as I always like to tell people, as bad as this is and as tough as it is for me, being the entire time I've been in Congress, we've been at war with these folks, with radical Islam. If you don't see it as a generational war, you'll never win it. And for sure, just kind of a basic understanding of war wars don't end until one side is completely annihilated or gives up. And that clearly hasn't happened, no matter how much the Obama administration wants to wish al-Qaeda and wish radical Islam away.
For those of us, Mr. Nunes, who are far outside of Washington, but certainly we keep an eye on what's going on there, and we watch and we read things daily, can you explain to us how closely does an administration work with your committee, especially in light of the temperature of the Middle East?
Well, the intelligence services are under close scrutiny by the Congress. A lot of what we do is behind closed doors for obvious reasons, because this is these are our nation's best kept secrets. It's really the crown jewels of what our military capabilities are. So they have to be as diligent as possible to keep us in the loop, because if not, it could do long-term damage to the intelligence institutions. It's very difficult, although it does happen, for a White House to politicize these capabilities. But because you break the law if you disclose these capabilities, oftentimes the intelligence services do not get as politically toxic as what you might see with Obamacare or tax reform or those kinds of things. So I would say that we hold them accountable. We argue a lot behind closed doors, but at the end of the day, the intelligence services are for the most part forthright.
You mentioned a few moments ago Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, he's coming to address Congress. I believe it's March 3rd. And there are members who have said they will not be in attendance that night. A couple of thoughts on this. Is I'll just let you know where I stand. I cannot imagine when Benjamin Netanyahu comes here. I cannot imagine why anybody would not want to be sitting in that chamber to listen. Having said that, does it discourage you that some of your colleagues in Congress will not be there? And did Speaker Boehner overstep his boundaries in terms of the invitation?
Well, do you or does anybody in their right mind think that Devin Nunes, Republican congressman from California, wants to listen to President Obama to give a State of the Union speech? No, I don't. But you know what? I have a responsibility to my constituents to be at these state, whether it's the United States president or a leader from a foreign country addressing a joint session of Congress. So I go to all of them. As I would think that the Democrats, even if they don't like Netanyahu or don't think it's right that he was invited, they should still be here. They have a responsibility. They get paid to be here. One of the interesting facts of this, I don't know if you noticed last week, but Speaker Boehner invited the Pope to be to speak to a joint session of Congress, and the Pope accepted. He's going to be here in September, and nobody's asked this question. But I know the answer. Did Speaker Boehner coordinate with the White House to invite the Pope to come and address a joint session of Congress? No, he did not. Nor does he have to, nor should he.
Well, then let me proceed to this. I've had two different opinions on this, and you're far closer to this than any of these individuals. We've talked about U.S.-Israeli relations, and of course the Iran nuclear deal, and we could do another hour on that. I had an Israeli-U.S. Relations expert Yoram Ettinger in here saying that relations with the two countries have never been stronger. Raphael Oren, diplomatic correspondent based in Jerusalem for the Times of Israel, his view was something different from that. Where do you put our relations with Israel right now?
So both are right. I would say that if you look at the Israeli relationship with the American people, with the United States Congress, with our intelligence services, they've never been stronger. If you look at the relationship between Israel and every White House administration since the founding of Israel after World War II, this is by far the worst relationship Israel's had with any president of the United States.
And I am of an age, Mr. Nunes, I was in college in Los Angeles during the Iranian hostage crisis. I remember that only too well, going back to my 15th floor dormitory room at USC and seeing bed sheets of Khomeini hanging out, and from that point on, it's never really been that good with Iran. Given that, what is if we proceed almost in step with Iran, and it's an odd bedfellow situation. Aren't we just giving them ammunition, and forgive the pun, to create or exacerbate the situation in the Middle East from the Israeli perspective? Aren't we giving them entirely too much of a doorway to that?
Well, it's madness. The people that overran our embassy, killed Americans, and have been killing Americans consistently since then, are the same people that are in charge today. There's only a handful of mullahs that are in charge, and these are the same people. The Iranians have killed, through their terrorist organizations, more Americans than we lost to Al Qaeda. Think about that.
That's staggering. It's a staggering thought.
I shouldn't say most, but many of the deaths that we suffered in Iraq were at the hands of Iranian-backed terrorist entities, Shiite terrorist entities. And most people know about Hezbollah's control in Lebanon and all the attacks that they've done over the years. So this is. The Iranians have become very good at funding these terrorist movements to try to take over capitals of countries. So you have, as we talked about earlier, this is really a three-dimensional chess game going on here. But it appears like President Obama wants to make a deal with the Iranians, who are probably the worst of all the chess pieces to make a deal with.
Now that you heard my conversation with Mr. Nunes, what is your thought? Should the United States put ground troops in Syria and in northern Iraq to combat ISIS? 559-247-2255. It's the Christopher Gabriel program on Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400.